My name is Jake, and before everything fell apart, my life was a testament to the pursuit of happiness and success. I remember those days vividly, each moment painted with a sense of purpose and fulfillment. My wife, Katie, and I were a team, building our dreams together in a world that seemed full of promise. Katie and I met during my college years. From the first moment I saw her, I knew there was something special about her. Her smile had a warmth that felt like home, and her laughter was a melody that made the mundane feel extraordinary. We quickly became inseparable, supporting each other through the trials of academia and early adulthood. When we graduated, we embarked on our journey with optimism. I landed a position at a prestigious company, one that promised growth and opportunity. My role was demanding but exhilarating. I was traveling frequently, meeting with clients, and closing deals. Each trip was an adventure, a chance to make an impact and move closer to our shared goals. The work was challenging, but the rewards were worth it. I was proud of what I had achieved, and Katie was my rock, cheering me on from home. Our home was a reflection of our love and aspirations. We had carefully chosen a cozy, stylish house in a charming neighborhood. It was our sanctuary, a place where we could escape the chaos of the world and find comfort in each other's company. The house was filled with memories of laughter, quiet evenings, and dreams of a future we were building together. Katie was more than just a supportive spouse. She was my confidant and best friend. She managed the household with grace, and despite the demands of my job, she never complained about the long hours I spent away. We had plans to start a family, and the thought of our future together was always at the forefront of our minds. We had discussed everything from the type of home we wanted to the names of our future children. Our life seemed to be a well-oiled machine, moving smoothly and effortlessly. There were occasional bumps, as with any relationship. But we always worked through them with open communication and mutual respect. Katie's understanding of my work commitments and her unwavering support made our bond even stronger. But life has a way of throwing unexpected curveballs, and as I look back, it's hard to believe that the stability we had built together would unravel so quickly. My frequent absences were a testament to our dedication to our goals, but they also created a distance that I would later realize was more significant than I had ever imagined. The foundation of our seemingly perfect life was about to be tested in ways I could never have foreseen. Before the storm hit, we were the picture of success and happiness. Our future seemed bright, filled with endless possibilities. Little did I know that the life we had so carefully crafted would soon be overshadowed by a betrayal that would shake the very core of our relationship. 8 months had passed since I last walked through the door of our home. The routine of my job, with its relentless schedule of business trips and high-stakes meetings, had become the norm. I was used to the constant hustle, the adrenaline of closing deals, and the satisfaction of a job well done. But nothing could prepare me for the profound shock that awaited me upon my return. As I stepped into our house, a familiar sense of comfort enveloped me. The soft glow of the hallway lights, the gentle hum of the air conditioning, and the scent of Katie's favorite candles made it feel like I had never been away. I took a deep breath, letting the feeling of home wash over me. Eager to reconnect with the life I had missed, I noticed that the house seemed unusually quiet. Katie wasn't there to greet me with her warm embrace and infectious smile. I called out her name, but there was no answer. I shrugged it off, assuming she might be out running errands or taking care of some personal business. I decided to drop my bags and relax for a bit, knowing that I could use the evening to catch up on all the little things I'd missed. While I was waiting, I began to look through the mail that had piled up during my absence. Bills, catalogs, and a few personal letters made up the stack. I sorted through them methodically, feeling a sense of normalcy return as I flipped through the envelopes. It was during this mundane task that I noticed Katie's phone lying on the kitchen counter. It was an odd place for it to be, but I assumed she had left it there in haste. As I picked up the phone, I felt a twinge of curiosity. I knew I shouldn't pry, but something compelled me to check if there were any missed calls or messages. I unlocked the screen with a familiar pattern, a routine I had performed countless times before. The moment the phone came to life, I was met with a barrage of notifications. My heart raced as I saw a series of messages from a contact saved as David. They were recent, dating back to just days before my return. I hesitated for a moment, feeling a lump form in my throat. With trembling fingers, I began to read through the messages. The first few messages seemed innocuous, brief check-ins and casual conversations. But as I scrolled further, the tone shifted dramatically. The messages grew more intimate, filled with affectionate terms and expressions of longing. David's words were laced with a familiarity that left no room for doubt. Katie had been engaged in a relationship with him. One message in particular stopped me in my tracks. It read, "I can't wait to see you tonight. I miss you so much. Every time I think of you, it feels like my heart is on fire." My vision blurred as the reality of the situation sank in. I could hardly breathe. Each word seemed to echo in my mind, amplifying the disbelief and pain I was feeling. I opened the message thread further, and the full extent of Katie's betrayal became clear. The conversations were not just fleeting or casual. They were filled with promises and plans for the future, plans that should have been reserved for the life we were building together. My mind raced as I tried to piece together the fragments of what I had read, each realization more devastating than the last. I felt a cold sweat break out across my forehead. The house, once a symbol of security and love, now felt like a cage of betrayal. I could hardly think straight, overwhelmed by a torrent of emotions that threatened to consume me. Anger, sadness, confusion, they all collided in a chaotic storm. Katie's absence was no longer just a minor inconvenience. It was the missing piece to a puzzle that had suddenly and violently rearranged itself. I needed answers. I needed to confront the reality that was unfolding before me. And I needed to understand how the woman I had trusted so completely could be involved in such a profound deception. As I stood there, holding her phone, the weight of the betrayal felt like a physical force. The future I had envisioned with Katie seemed to shatter into a million pieces, leaving me grappling with a sense of loss and a desire for answers that I could not yet fathom. The discovery of Katie's infidelity had transformed my home from a haven of love into a battleground of heartbreak and mistrust. The house was silent, the kind of silence that felt like a heavy blanket smothering every corner. I had spent the past hours grappling with the heart-wrenching discovery, pacing through rooms that now felt foreign and alien. The familiar comfort of home had become a place of torment, and I was consumed by a storm of emotions that seemed impossible to quell. It was late afternoon when Katie finally walked through the door. I could hear the sound of her footsteps from the hallway, and my heart skipped a beat. I had been dreading this moment, the confrontation that would force us to face the shattered remnants of our life together. I watched as Katie entered the room, her face showing a mixture of exhaustion and apprehension. She looked around, her eyes finally resting on me with an expression I couldn't quite decipher. "Jake," she began, her voice trembling slightly. "I'm so sorry I'm late." I interrupted her, my voice cold and steady. "Katie, we need to talk. Now." The look on her face told me she knew exactly what I meant. She walked slowly to the living room, where I was waiting, and sat down on the couch, her posture tense and uneasy. I followed her, sitting across from her with a sense of finality. I held her phone in my hand, a tangible representation of the betrayal that had shattered our world. "Do you want to explain this?" I asked, holding up the phone. The screen was still unlocked, displaying the damning messages from David. Katie's face went pale as she recognized the content. Tears welled up in her eyes as she took a deep breath. Struggling to maintain composure. "Jake, I never wanted you to find out this way. I know this looks terrible, and it is. I am so sorry." She paused as if gathering the strength to continue. "I started seeing David about 6 months ago. It began when things started to get hard for us. The financial strain, the endless stress, and the distance between us, it all became overwhelming. I felt like I was drowning, and I made the worst mistake of my life. Katie's voice cracked as she continued, her emotions spilling out uncontrollably. I didn't know how to handle the pressure. I was so lonely and scared, and I didn't want to burden you with my problems. I was trying to keep everything together while you were away, but I couldn't. I didn't want you to see how much I was struggling. Her gaze fell to her hands, which were clasped tightly in her lap. David was there for me when I felt like I had no one else. It started as just talking, but it quickly became more. I never intended for it to go this far. I thought I was just looking for comfort, but I ended up betraying you in the worst possible way. She looked up at me, her eyes filled with remorse. I know that what I did is unforgivable. I can't even begin to express how deeply sorry I am. I never wanted to hurt you, and I hate myself for causing you so much pain. You didn't deserve this. You were always so dedicated, working so hard for us, and I failed you. I'm so sorry, Jake. The sincerity in her voice was clear, but the damage had been done. I could see the anguish in her expression and the genuine regret that she was trying to convey. Still, the words of apology felt hollow against the backdrop of the betrayal. The reality of her actions was a gaping wound that couldn't be easily healed. I know this doesn't make anything better, Katie said, her voice breaking. But I am willing to do whatever it takes to make amends. I understand if you can't forgive me. I understand if you want nothing to do with me. But I hope you can find it in your heart to at least give me a chance to explain and to try to make things right. The room was thick with tension as her words hung in the air. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions: anger, hurt, confusion, and a deep sense of betrayal. The woman who had been my partner, my confidant, and my best friend was now a source of profound pain. Katie's confession was a moment of raw honesty, but it was also a stark reminder of the chasm that had opened between us. The future I had envisioned with her was now overshadowed by the reality of her infidelity. As I looked at her, I realized that no matter how sincere her apologies were, the damage was done, and the road ahead was fraught with uncertainty and heartache. Sitting across from Katie, her tear-streaked face a mirror of her remorse, I found myself drowning in a torrent of emotions that seemed to have no end. The room felt suffocating, the air heavy with the weight of unspoken words and shattered trust. Her apology, sincere as it was, did little to soothe the storm raging within me. The first feeling that surged through me was disbelief. It was as though I was trapped in a nightmarish reality, where the life I had meticulously built was being dismantled piece by piece. The images of our shared past, the laughter and dreams, now seemed tainted by the betrayal. I had always envisioned a future with Katie, filled with love and companionship. But now, every memory was marred by the knowledge of her infidelity. The disbelief gave way to an overwhelming sense of betrayal, a feeling so deep it seemed to cut through my very soul. The betrayal was not just a breach of trust, it felt like a personal assault. Katie was supposed to be my rock, the one person I could always rely on. To learn that she had sought solace and affection in another man was a wound that seemed to bleed endlessly. I had sacrificed so much for our relationship: long hours, frequent absences, and relentless work. I had done everything to ensure our future was secure, only to discover that the very person I trusted most had betrayed me in the most intimate way possible. The pain was almost physical, a gnawing ache that settled in my chest and refused to leave. Each memory of our time together now felt tainted by the knowledge of her deceit. It was as if every smile, every touch, and every promise had been a lie. The future we had planned, the life we had envisioned, was now nothing more than a cruel illusion. The pain was compounded by the realization that, despite my efforts to be the best partner I could be, I had been deceived and left vulnerable. As I listened to Katie's tearful confession, I felt a profound sense of disillusionment. The woman I had trusted with my heart had shattered it with her actions. It was a deep-seated disappointment, not just in her, but in the very idea of our relationship. I had believed in us, in the promise of a shared future, and now I was faced with the stark reality that those beliefs had been built on a foundation of lies. Forgiveness seemed like an impossible notion. The idea of moving past this betrayal and reconciling with Katie felt like a distant dream. I tried to imagine a future where I could look at her without the sting of betrayal coloring my perception, but it was an image I couldn't hold on to. The pain was too fresh, the hurt too deep. The emotional scar was too profound to simply heal with words or apologies. Katie's tears, her pleas for forgiveness, only seemed to deepen my anguish. I understood that she was hurting too, but her pain did not lessen my own. It was as if her sorrow only highlighted the depth of my suffering. The sense of being wronged was overwhelming, and it clouded any thoughts of reconciliation or understanding. I couldn't shake the feeling that, despite her apologies, the damage done was irreparable. In the quiet aftermath of her confession, I sat there feeling hollow and numb. The emotional turmoil left me drained, and I struggled to make sense of it all. The trust that had once been the cornerstone of our relationship was now a distant memory, replaced by a chasm of hurt and mistrust. The future I had envisioned, filled with hope and happiness, now seemed like a cruel joke. The realization dawned on me that I could not simply forgive and forget. The hurt was too profound, the betrayal too personal. I knew that moving forward, I would need to confront these feelings and navigate the painful path of healing, but for now, all I could feel was the raw, unrelenting pain of being betrayed by the one person I had trusted the most. The days following Katie's confession were a blur of raw emotion and discontent. My mind, once occupied by the routine of work and the plans for our future, was now consumed by thoughts of retribution. The betrayal I felt was so profound that I couldn't shake the desire to exact revenge. It became clear that the only way I could regain a semblance of control was by meticulously planning my response to the pain that had been inflicted upon me. I knew that simply confronting Katie or expressing my anger wouldn't be enough. The hurt was too deep, and the betrayal too profound. I needed a plan that would address both Katie and David, the man who had played a part in this deceit. I began to devise a strategy, one that would exploit their vulnerabilities and ensure that the consequences of their actions were as impactful as the hurt I felt. The first step in my plan was to scrutinize Katie's financial situation. During our marriage, I had been privy to our financial records, and I was aware of the complexities of our accounts. I began by reviewing every transaction, looking for discrepancies or weaknesses that I could exploit. I knew that Katie had always been meticulous with our finances, but in the chaos of our recent troubles, she might have overlooked certain details. I discovered that Katie had recently taken out a substantial loan, ostensibly to cover some of our joint expenses. However, the terms of the loan were unusually harsh, with high interest rates and penalties for missed payments. It was clear that this financial strain had been a significant factor in her decision to seek comfort elsewhere. I realized that exploiting this loan could have a profound effect on her. Next, I turned my attention to David. I had managed to gather some information about him from Katie's messages and social media. David appeared to be a successful businessman, with a reputation for being somewhat of a high roller. I found out where he worked and began to gather intelligence on his professional and personal vulnerabilities. His business dealings were not as spotless as they seemed, and there were rumors of questionable practices that might be used to my advantage. I decided that the best approach was to target both Katie's and David's financial stability. My plan involved several key components. 1. Exposing financial irregularities, I prepared a detailed report outlining the financial discrepancies in Katie's loan application. I planned to anonymously send this report to her loan provider and the financial regulators. The aim was to cause enough trouble to make it difficult for her to manage the loan and potentially jeopardize her credit rating. 2. Leveraging David's business practices, using the information I had gathered, I began to compile evidence of David's questionable business practices. I reached out to sources who might be able to corroborate these claims and began drafting a formal complaint to be submitted to relevant industry watchdogs and regulatory bodies. My goal was to initiate an investigation that would tarnish his professional reputation and put his business dealings under scrutiny. 3. Creating a financial dilemma. I planned to use Katie's and David's financial vulnerabilities to create a situation where they would have to face significant monetary consequences. I intended to arrange for anonymous tips to be sent to various parties that could amplify their financial troubles, including potential business partners and creditors. 4. Personal impact. I also wanted to ensure that the personal consequences of their actions were felt. I gathered information about their social circles and planned to subtly spread the news of their misconduct and personal issues. The aim was to create a ripple effect that would damage their social standing and relationships. 5. Emotional blowback. Lastly, I prepared to confront Katie and David with the evidence of the turmoil I had caused. I wanted them to understand the full impact of their actions, not only on our lives but on their own. As I moved forward with the execution of my plan, I felt a sense of cold determination. The intricate web of actions I was weaving was not just about revenge, it was about asserting control and ensuring that Katie and David faced the consequences of their betrayal. The process was meticulous and required a careful balance of timing and discretion, but each step brought me closer to the sense of justice I was seeking. The plan for revenge was not born out of a desire for petty vindication but rather a deep-seated need to address the wrongs that had been done to me. The emotional pain I felt demanded a response that would make a profound statement. As I set my plan into motion, I steeled myself for the repercussions, knowing that the path I had chosen would bring about significant changes in all our lives. The day had finally arrived when I would put my meticulously crafted plan into action. The sense of anticipation was palpable, a mix of cold resolve and an unsettling excitement. Each step of the plan had been carefully considered, and now it was time to see it unfold. I was determined to follow through with every detail, knowing that my actions would have far-reaching consequences for Katie and David. I started with Katie's financial situation. My first move was to expose the discrepancies in her recent loan application. I prepared a comprehensive report outlining the irregularities, including misleading information and potential fraud. The report was detailed, citing specific figures and documents that painted a clear picture of financial misconduct. Once the report was complete, I had to ensure it reached the right hands. I decided to remain anonymous, understanding that the impact would be greater if Katie and her creditors were unaware of my involvement. I sent the report to Katie's loan provider, the financial regulators, and a few relevant media contacts who were known for their investigative journalism. The aim was to create a storm of scrutiny around her finances, making it difficult for her to manage the loan and causing a significant dent in her creditworthiness. With Katie's financial situation set into motion, I turned my attention to David. The information I had gathered about his business practices was troubling. I compiled a detailed dossier, including evidence of unethical practices and potential legal violations. I reached out to industry watchdogs and regulatory bodies, submitting the dossier as a formal complaint. I included specific examples and supporting documents that could prompt an immediate investigation into his business dealings. I knew that the success of this part of the plan depended on creating a buzz. To ensure that David's business practices were thoroughly investigated, I leaked key details to financial blogs and industry forums. My goal was to stir up public and professional interest, applying pressure on regulatory bodies to act swiftly. The combination of my formal complaint and the public exposure was designed to tarnish David's professional reputation and disrupt his business operations. As the days went by, the consequences of my actions began to materialize. Katie's loan provider contacted her, demanding explanations and threatening legal action. The media reports highlighted the discrepancies in her financial records, painting her in a negative light. The stress of dealing with these financial troubles was palpable, and I could only imagine the mounting pressure she was under. David's business faced a series of setbacks as well. The industry watchdogs initiated a full-scale investigation, and the negative media coverage tarnished his reputation. Clients and partners began to distance themselves, and his business dealings were scrutinized more closely than ever before. The ripple effect of the investigation caused significant disruptions, affecting both his personal and professional life. Watching from a distance, I felt a chilling sense of satisfaction. The plan was working, and the consequences were becoming evident. But even as I observed the fallout, I couldn't escape the feeling of emptiness that accompanied my actions. The revenge I sought was unfolding, but it did little to fill the void left by the betrayal. Katie and David were reeling from the impact of their own choices, and their lives were being upended in ways I had hoped for. The financial strain and professional fallout were significant, and their struggles were a testament to the effectiveness of my plan. However, the satisfaction of seeing them face the consequences was tempered by the realization that the pain and heartbreak of betrayal couldn't be erased by revenge alone. The execution of the plan had been thorough and deliberate, with each step calculated to achieve the maximum impact. But as I watched the results unfold, I couldn't shake the feeling that the revenge I had sought had come at a cost. The emotional weight of the situation lingered, and I was left to confront the reality that the path I had chosen was not a simple solution to the complex feelings of betrayal and hurt that I was experiencing. The repercussions of my meticulously executed plan began to unfold with a dramatic intensity that I had only partially anticipated. Katie and David, once secure in their lives, now found themselves engulfed in a whirlwind of chaos and turmoil. The once familiar stability of their lives had crumbled, replaced by a disorienting mess of financial and professional crises. Katie was the first to feel the full force of the fallout. The phone calls from her loan provider became incessant, each one more threatening than the last. The financial discrepancies I had exposed led to an avalanche of demands for immediate repayment and legal actions. The mounting stress was evident in her voice every time she answered a call, and her attempts to explain or negotiate fell on deaf ears. Her bank accounts, once a symbol of security, were now a source of constant anxiety. The media reports highlighting the discrepancies in her loan application only added fuel to the fire. The negative publicity not only tarnished her reputation but also affected her relationships with friends and colleagues. The gossip and speculation surrounding her financial troubles spread quickly, causing her social circle to question her integrity and reliability. Katie's attempts to salvage her situation seemed futile. Each day brought new complications, from unexpected legal fees to damaged credit scores. The stress of managing these issues began to take a physical toll on her. She appeared more haggard and worn out with each passing day, her once vibrant demeanor now replaced by a shadow of worry and exhaustion. David, too, was grappling with the fallout from my actions. The formal complaint I had submitted to industry watchdogs triggered a full-scale investigation into his business practices. The scrutiny was relentless, with auditors combing through his financial records and industry regulators questioning his every move. The negative media coverage exacerbated the situation, painting him as a pariah in his field. The investigation's impact on David's business was severe. Clients began to withdraw their support, and business partners reconsidered their associations. Contracts were canceled, and potential deals fell through. The financial strain on his business was immense, and the professional embarrassment took a toll on his confidence and morale. He was forced to face not only the public relations disaster but also the very real possibility of legal consequences. David's personal life was equally affected. The strain of the investigation and the professional setbacks led to tensions in his relationships. His friends and acquaintances, who had once admired his success, now looked at him with skepticism and concern. The social isolation and professional humiliation created a tumultuous environment that left him struggling to regain control. Katie and David's paths intersected with increasing frequency as they dealt with their respective crises. The shared experience of facing the consequences of their actions only added to the drama and conflict between them. Their conversations, once filled with affection and shared plans, now revolved around navigating the chaos that had enveloped their lives. The strain on their relationship was palpable, and the stress only seemed to amplify their conflicts. Katie's realization of the extent of my actions came as a crushing blow. The financial and professional turmoil she was experiencing made it clear that her life had been turned upside down. Her attempts to reach out to me were met with silence, as I maintained my distance, watching from afar as the drama unfolded. The message was clear: the consequences of betrayal were not only immediate but also far-reaching. The emotional toll on Katie was evident in her despair and frustration. She struggled to find a way out of the mess, her attempts to restore some semblance of normalcy proving increasingly elusive. Her life had become a chaotic series of setbacks and challenges, each one a stark reminder of the price of her actions. David's predicament was similarly dire. The investigation and the loss of business had pushed him to the brink. He faced mounting pressures and dwindling resources, each day bringing new obstacles to overcome. His efforts to salvage his reputation and business were met with limited success, as the damage was extensive and the repercussions far-reaching. Amid the chaos, Katie and David were forced to confront the reality of their situation. The scale of the consequences was a harsh reminder of the choices they had made and the impact those choices had on their lives. The once secure and confident individuals now faced a future marked by uncertainty and upheaval. The conflict and drama that unfolded as a result of my plan served as a vivid reminder of the complexity of human emotions and the far-reaching effects of betrayal. Katie and David's lives had been irrevocably altered, and the chaos that ensued was a testament to the depth of the consequences that followed. Amid the chaos that had engulfed her life, Katie reached a breaking point. The weight of the financial strain, the professional humiliation, and the personal anguish was too much for her to bear. The realization that her world had been irreparably shattered brought her to a desperate state. With every passing day, she became more determined to rectify the situation, even as the odds seemed insurmountable. Katie's first attempt to reach out to me came in the form of a heartfelt letter. I remember sitting in my office, staring at the envelope as if it were a foreign object. The handwriting on the front was unmistakable, it was Katie's. I opened it with a sense of dread, knowing that her words would be filled with remorse and desperation. The letter was a detailed account of her struggles and her attempts to come to terms with the magnitude of the mess she was in. She wrote about the emotional toll it had taken on her, the sleepless nights spent worrying about the future, and the overwhelming sense of regret that consumed her. She expressed her deep sorrow for the pain she had caused and acknowledged the severity of her mistakes. In her letter, Katie reiterated her apologies with a level of sincerity that was hard to ignore. She spoke of her commitment to change, detailing the steps she was taking to address her financial problems and to rectify the errors she had made. She promised to seek professional help to manage her stress and to make amends for the deceit that had fractured our relationship. Katie's letter was followed by a series of increasingly desperate phone calls. Each conversation was marked by her emotional pleas for forgiveness. Her voice trembled with sincerity as she begged me to reconsider, to understand the depth of her regret. She spoke of the future she wanted to rebuild, not just for herself but for us. Her desperation was palpable, a stark contrast to the calm resolve I had maintained throughout this ordeal. She even sought the help of mutual friends, hoping that their influence might sway my opinion. They reached out to me, pleading on her behalf, trying to convince me that she was genuinely trying to make things right. They shared stories of her struggles and her efforts to rectify her mistakes, painting a picture of someone who was determined to turn her life around. Despite her best efforts, I remained unmoved. I listened to her appeals, read her letter, and spoke with those who supported her, but my resolve was unwavering. The depth of her betrayal was not something that could be easily forgiven or forgotten. The emotional and practical fallout from her actions had left a mark that was too profound to simply erase with apologies. My decision was grounded in the realization that the betrayal had irrevocably altered our relationship. The pain of her infidelity and the subsequent chaos was something that could not be mitigated by promises of change or expressions of regret. Her attempts to mend the situation, while earnest, felt inadequate against the backdrop of the hurt she had caused. Katie's repeated assurances of her commitment to change and her sincere apologies were met with my firm stance. I was not interested in reconciliation or restitution. The damage had been done, and the trust that had once bound us was beyond repair. My response remained resolute, not out of spite, but because I understood the gravity of the situation and the limits of forgiveness. As Katie continued to navigate the fallout from my plan, her efforts to restore some semblance of normalcy were overshadowed by the reality of her actions. The financial and personal consequences she faced were a direct result of the choices she had made, and no amount of contrition could undo the past. Her life had been turned upside down, and despite her best efforts to make amends, the road to recovery was fraught with challenges and setbacks. In the end, Katie's reaction was a poignant reminder of the complexities of human emotions and the limits of redemption. Her attempts to fix the situation and her repeated pleas for forgiveness were heartfelt, but they did little to change the reality of the situation. The pain and betrayal had created a rift that could not be bridged by apologies alone, leaving both of us to confront the consequences of the choices we had made. The decision to end my marriage with Katie was not one I took lightly. After weeks of turmoil and emotional upheaval, it became increasingly clear that there was no path forward for us. The betrayal and the fallout had created a rift that seemed insurmountable, and despite Katie's earnest attempts to make amends, the damage was beyond repair. The process of divorce began with a formal notice. I instructed my lawyer to draft the necessary documents, ensuring that the proceedings were as thorough and precise as possible. The legal aspects of the divorce were a significant undertaking, involving a detailed division of our shared assets and debts. Every financial decision, every asset, and every piece of property was scrutinized and evaluated. The goal was to ensure an equitable distribution, but the process was inherently adversarial and emotionally charged. Katie and I had accumulated a range of assets over the years: our home, investments, and personal belongings. The division of these assets became a battleground. We had to assess the value of our property, negotiate the terms of the division, and confront the reality of our separate futures. The discussions were often tense and fraught with emotion. Each decision carried a weight of finality, symbolizing the end of a chapter we had once envisioned together. As the legal proceedings unfolded, Katie and I also had to address the emotional fallout of our separation. The finality of our divorce was a stark reminder of the end of our relationship. It was not just the dissolution of our legal and financial ties but also the severing of the personal bond we had shared. The process was a harsh reminder of how far we had drifted from the life we had once envisioned together. The separation was marked by a clear and deliberate disconnection. I decided to cut off all forms of communication with Katie, not out of spite, but as a necessary step towards closing this chapter of my life. The emotional ties that once bound us were severed, and the boundaries were firmly established. I avoided any further contact or interaction, understanding that maintaining distance was essential for my healing and closure. The finality of the divorce and the complete separation from Katie was a poignant moment. It was a recognition of the fact that our relationship had irreversibly changed and that moving forward required a clean break. The emotional weight of the decision was immense, but it was also a necessary step in reclaiming my sense of self and moving on from the past. In the aftermath of the divorce, I found myself grappling with a complex mixture of emotions. The finality of the separation was a sobering realization of the changes that had occurred in my life. As I looked back on the events that had transpired, I began to reflect on the broader implications of the choices I had made and the impact they had on me. The quest for revenge, while initially satisfying in its execution, did not bring the relief I had anticipated. The fallout from my actions had created a series of consequences that, while impactful, did not alleviate the emotional burden of the betrayal. I had hoped that seeing Katie and David face repercussions would provide a sense of justice or closure, but instead, it had left me with a lingering sense of emptiness. The process of divorce and the subsequent separation from Katie forced me to confront the reality of my own emotions. The sense of betrayal and hurt had been deeply ingrained, And while revenge had served as a form of catharsis, it did not heal the wounds. Instead, it highlighted the complexity of human emotions and the limits of retribution. As I reflected on the experience, I realized that moving forward required more than just a break from the past. It required a genuine effort to heal and to find a sense of peace. The act of letting go, both emotionally and physically, was a critical step in this process. The realization that revenge had not provided the relief I sought led me to a deeper understanding of the importance of personal closure and acceptance. In the end, the journey through betrayal, revenge, and separation was a transformative one. It revealed the depth of human emotions and the challenges of moving on from a painful past. While the desire for retribution had driven me, it was the act of letting go and embracing the future that truly offered a path to healing. As I closed this chapter of my life, I recognized that the process of moving forward was about more than just escaping the past. It was about finding a new sense of purpose and reclaiming my own identity. The experiences had been harrowing, but they also provided an opportunity for growth and self-discovery. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was one that I was now prepared to face with a renewed sense of determination and clarity.